Hello and welcome, I'm your Code Monkey. Unity's yearly Unite conference has just wrapped up. They invited me over there, so this is my recap of the entire event. I'm going to cover everything on the keynote, like all the features in Unity 6, when it's coming out, all the free downloadable projects, and tons of stuff. After that, I'm going to cover the roadmap talk. This is where they talked about what is coming in Unity 6.1, and importantly, the next generation of Unity. That one involves lots of really awesome stuff, like integrating game objects and entities. And in the end, I will also cover all the talks and interesting things that I saw at the show floor. This video is pretty huge. I've got a lot of things that I want to talk about. There's timestamp in the description if you want to skip ahead to a particular section. And just for starters, the event was really awesome. I think this was my favorite Unite. Thanks so much to everyone who came up to me to say hi. It was awesome meeting so many cool people. Hearing how my videos helped someone go through college or achieve their dream of making a game, that makes me so happy to hear. For example, a lot of people really enjoyed the Kitchen Chaos course. A bunch of them mentioned my C# course. Someone even mentioned my super old sprite sheet tutorial. Another one got a ton of help for my super niche graph tutorial. So yeah, thank you all so much for all your kind words. In total, I think I took like 50 pictures with a ton of people. It was awesome. I'm definitely super motivated to keep making super awesome videos and tutorials to help you on your learning journey. Then I also met a bunch of really awesome asset store publishers, and I was able to ask questions directly to a bunch of Unity people from all kinds of teams, from 2D to AI to dots and a bunch more. So yeah, really fun event. If you couldn't make it, then maybe I'll see you next year. Okay, so starting off with the keynote. This one started off with a speech from the new CEO of Unity, Matt. This is obviously a pretty big change. Basically, the entire leadership of Unity was completely switched throughout this entire year. And of course, just before Unite, they dropped the bombshell news that they were canceling the runtime fee. That was awesome, and throughout the entire event, throughout the keynote, the roadmap, and all the talks, throughout all of that, no one mentioned the runtime fee at all. So it definitely feels like turning a new page. I could say the sentiment towards the new CEO and the new direction of the company has been really positive, both from people outside and inside the company. And I think I can also say that it does not seem to be just for show. During Unite, I attended a community roundtable. So in there were all the insiders, along with a bunch of people from their MVP program. These were people that are really active in their discussions, Discord forum, and so on. So it really was all about community. And technically, he was only supposed to be there for just 20 minutes, but ended up staying the whole hour, answering tons of questions and being very honest. So it does appear he is generally trying to make Unity the best it can be. It is trying to make it really focus on community and really just making the best game engine to make any kind of game. Now that's really great news considering everything that happened this past year. So my only thought is that I hope that this new direction, this sentiment does continue throughout the future and is not just a short-term thing. Now this year is all about Unity 6. It has already been in preview for the past few months. They mentioned how this is the most stable release to date. Crashes are down and performance is up. I can say that I've been using the preview version myself for about 4 months now. It's what I've been using to make my dots course. I've been using the Unity 6 preview for all that time and I don't think I've had a single crash. Unity 6 contains improvements on graphics, multiplayer, and platforms, and of course dots, which went into 1.0 in the past 12 months. Now he specifically mentions, quote, the most stable release to date, which again sounds to me like they're on the right track, actually focusing on the right things for the engine. The Unity 6 full release will be out on October 17. Now onto the graphics features in Unity 6. There's general improvements across the board, better memory, better performance. There's the big new graphics features they've been talking about for the past few months. Things like light baking with different lighting scenarios, adaptive probe volumes, which automatically places probes around the level, the GPU resident drawer and GPU occlusion tunneling. These offload some tasks of the GPU and making them super fast, as well as spatial temporal and post-processing. This is their upscaler so you can render a small window and then have it increase. All of these look really awesome, literally just tick a box and your game suddenly runs faster. I have yet to try any of these features, so I definitely look forward to making a video and experimenting with all of them. Now, one awesome demo that showcases all of this in action is the Fantasy Kingdom demo. It does look really good with some super high quality lighting and tons of objects throughout the scene. And over here, they even show it running in real time on a tiny mobile device. So this demo is really awesome, and it's actually going to be fully downloadable, including all the assets alongside the Unity 6 release. I'm definitely looking forward to trying out this one for myself. Then speaking of visuals, they unveiled their latest cinematic. It's called Time Ghost. It looks absolutely insane. I think this might be my new favorite cinematic they've done. All the materials, meshes, all of these animations, the particles, pretty much everything, all of it looks really excellent. You've got super high quality models, super high quality textures, everything looks really insane. For all the materials, you've got super realistic cloth deformation. They really showcase their super impressive hair tech. Even the paper floating in the wind looks really awesome. All the grass, all the foliage. While zoom out, it has a huge scale, and while zoom in, it has a ton of detail. And most impressive of all of this was running in real time, running on a computer that had a 4090. Now technically that is a very expensive GPU, it costs about $2,500, but still it is not a supercomputer. So seeing this run in real time on something like that is actually really impressive. And the demo was actually playable on the show floor, so yep, I can say this is indeed real time. This really is an excellent showpiece of just how good the engine can look. They used all the graphics features to make this come to life, so they used adaptive probe volumes, light baking, light interpolation, and all kinds of things. The grass itself apparently contained 12 million blades of grass, but with a ton of optimization, they rendered it using entities. Because of that, and using some billboards, they managed to render all of it in super high detail, and all of it running in real time. And for performance, they also did something really awesome, a really clever trick. Sentis is Unity's inference machine learning model. It is some really impressive tech, but I haven't yet seen many useful practical use case scenarios. So this right here, is an excellent real-time example. Doing mesh deformation in real time is something that is extremely expensive. You really can't do high-quality deformations in real time. So instead of doing those very expensive calculations in real time, instead of that, they just generated a bunch of training data, so some super high-quality cloth deformations. Then they trained an AI model on that data, and using that trained model, they were then able to inference that data and get some super realistic deformed meshes, again, while running super fast. The pre-calculated mesh deformation, that one had 1.5 gigabytes, and the final model, that was just 50 megabytes. They spent just 1 hour training the model, and in the end, the whole thing runs in just 0.8 milliseconds. So this really is an awesome use case for Sentis. You compute some super high quality, very slow computations offline, then use those to train an AI model, and then easily run that AI model in runtime. Again, very clever, super awesome stuff. And this demo is also going to be downloadable alongside Unity 6. Again, I can't wait to try this out, it looks really awesome. Then on multiplayer, this is something that Unity has been investing a lot for this past year. One recent tool they've published is the Multiplayer Center. This is basically a tool that helps you pre-select all of the other Unity tools that help you in making some kind of specific game. So you select a certain game genre from a drop-down menu, then select all of the various properties like the gameplay, is it slow or fast, is modding important or not important, how many players, and so on. You do all of that, and then it automatically recommends a bunch of things. So it recommends the netcode solution, so netcode for game objects or netcode for entities, then recommends something for holding servers, so should they be player hosted, should they be dedicated servers, and so on. Then recommend some extra services like VVox and so on. And then with a single button click, you can install all of these packages. I think this is an excellent tool and definitely makes the process of creating a brand new multiplayer game so much easier. If you want more detail for all these tools, then check out my video on that topic. Another super important multiplayer thing that I actually only found out about recently was the multiplayer widgets. These are a bunch of pre-made widgets that Unity has made, and you can literally just drag and drop and everything works automatically. So you literally just drag something onto the scene and all of a sudden you have lobby and relay fully implemented, fully working. They actually showcased this working in real time during their NetCheck livestream, so that was really great. After that, another multiplayer tool that you might already know about is Multiplayer Play Mode. This one lets you spawn multiple instances of the editor and use those to easily test out your multiplayer games. So you no longer need to make separate builds and go through that entire process. You literally just take a checkbox and it will automatically spawn multiple instances and you can easily connect between them and make sure that everything is working. They've also updated Mega City Metro to work with Unity 6, so if you want, you can go ahead and try all of this. So multiplayer is definitely something that Unity continues to invest pretty heavily in. And after that was the best moment on the keynote, the strawberry guy. I actually spoke to him at the event, he was super nice. The game Digenheim is a top-down action roguelike in both single player and co-op. So they mentioned how they use all the Unity multiplayer tools to bring all of this to life. And specifically how it was so much faster to use all the tools that are already pre-integrated. They already work very well with one another. So that was so much easier as opposed to using a mishmash of tons of third-party tools to make your game. Unity already has a massive amount of tools, and thankfully they're all very well integrated with one another. So because of this, if you use all of these, all of those are very easy to work with one another. Then speaking of tools, there was a section on LiveOps. I have to say this is a topic that I really don't know much about, but they do mention how their tools help games like Marvel Snap put out constant updates. So that's nice. After that was a section on Google Cloud. Honestly, this was lots of buzzwords and talk about AI. So a ton of words, but not really much substance, at least not much that I could really understand. Couldn't really figure out a proper use case for what they were talking about. But again, LiveOps is definitely not my area. Then another thing that is also not my area of expertise is mobile. It's always insane to hear some stats about mobile, like how Subway Surfers has apparently been around for 12 years and was downloaded 4 billion times. That is insane. Technically that's one download for every second person in the entire of the earth. Apparently it is now easier to integrate monetization directly in the editor. So I guess that's nice for mobile devs. You can see lots of reports, lots of graphs with lots of stats. Again, this is not my area, but it all sounds pretty nice. Then on platforms, Unity continues to invest and make sure that your games can be playable on literally anything. Lately, their big focus is actually on the web, making it so your game is super easy to load, that it runs on anything, literally just open a browser and your game is playable, and that it's playable on both a desktop browser and a mobile browser. They showed a demo of a really impressive 3D game, and apparently this is running on a normal browser. Personally, I find this web focus to be quite fascinating. For me, I grew up in the era of Flash and it made me really sad to see Flash die. It was super fascinating technology. As long as you had access to a browser, you could play a million of unique games. That was great for players and also great for developers. For me, the 5 years that I spent making Flash games, those really helped me learn a ton about game design, game development, and so on. So who knows, perhaps with all of these improvements in the web, perhaps with all of that, something similar to the Flash area might come back in the future. And that was the keynote. They covered quite a lot in many areas. It was great, but my favorite is always the roadmap talk. This is where they talk about what is coming in the future. They started talking about the new version release cycle. They call it a generational release model. Now they are going to have longer time between each major version, at least 2 years. So that means no Unity 7 or whatever they call it next year in 2025. Instead, they will do Unity 6.1, then perhaps 6.2, 6.3 and so on before finally making the other version. Now the goal with all of this is to minimize the upgrade disruption. Now for me, as someone who makes tutorials, I think this change is actually pretty nice. Simply because it means that tutorials stay up to date for longer, even though many things in Unity don't really change at all throughout the years. Despite that, there's always a lot of people asking questions, things like going to some kind of tutorial talking about physics and asking, is this code still relevant nowadays? The answer is yes, because physics hasn't really changed in many years. But if the version shown on the video isn't exactly what that person has, if so, then it always leads to these questions. So you have fewer massive version changes, hopefully that should help clear up confusion, at least in beginners. Now the versions will still go through an alpha, beta, and preview phase, and then the full release that one is support for at least 2 years. Then there are smaller patches as usual, and by April of next year, 6.1 update will be out. So that's the new version cadence. The next section, this one I found a little bit confusing. They started talking about Mesh LOD. So this is a new system that automatically generates LODs at import and automatically selects the correct LOD based on distance. It looks really good. They showcased them with a massive reduction, and despite that, visually it still looks really good. Then they talked about deferred plus rendering. This one apparently improves rendering quite a bit, and specifically it is optimized very well for mobile. They talked about build profiles with some predefined profiles. Talks about support for larger screens and foldables, along with a new XR starter template and multiplayer template. Then WebGPU is still not production ready, but you can start and trying it out right now, and a bunch of improvements to reduce loading time in web games. So basically the confusing part to me is that I'm not sure if all of this is actually coming in Unity 6, so it's out right now, or it's coming only in Unity 6.1. They really just said all of this is coming in the Unity 6 generation. Things like build profiles are already out, they already exist. So maybe this is a new update coming in 6.1. Then isn't deferred plus rendering already a thing? So maybe the optimizations for mobile, that's what's coming in the future. Then they also mentioned multiplayer things like the various widgets, which again are out right now. So that is why I'm a bit confused as to what exactly is out right now in Unity 6 and what will be coming in 6.1. One thing that is super awesome and is coming in the future is host migration. This is one big missing feature from the current netcode. If the host disconnects, the game is essentially over. Host migration is by far the most requested feature. I've seen a bunch of comments in my videos asking about it. Normally you have to handle it yourself, but thankfully it is coming directly into the engine. So all of this coming to Unity 6. By the way, they also did not mention anything beyond 6.1, so I have no idea if that means 6.1 and then the next one is going to be the next gen version, or if there's going to be a .1, .2, .3 and so on. But then of course the super exciting stuff is Unity next generation. One thing I quite like is how they mentioned the word re-architecture several times, how they are apparently not afraid to rework core parts of the engine. They're not afraid to do all of that work, which I'm sure is very difficult, but might yield some really insanely positive results. They mentioned the 3 core themes for this next gen version. The 3 core themes are simplicity, iteration, and power. On simplicity, the goal is to require you to make fewer decisions by making it so there's just one great tool for each specific purpose. In doing so, they also mentioned the word deprecation, specifically marking something as deprecated, but not removing it in that version and only removing it in a future version. Now, one thing I did not like is how they reference deprecation specifically with regards to the UI. They mentioned how UI Toolkit is improving, which is really awesome. How they're adding support for world space UI, custom shaders, keyframe animation, and a bunch more. Those are all really great upgrades, but I really do not like how they mentioned potentially deprecating Unity UI. They want to make UI Toolkit the only single UI solution, and personally I'm not a fan of that. I have used UI Toolkit and I did like it quite a bit. I use it for making the companion project in my C# course, and for making those editor tools, I really enjoyed it. That was really good. But for making runtime UI, for that I still much prefer using Unity UI. It is already a very robust, very capable tool. I already know how to work with it. So for runtime UI, I still very much prefer Unity UI. Now, they did not mention any kind of hard cutoff, and these are just proposals. This version is still very much in their own process. They did say how they're listening to feedback. So my feedback is that I think it's really awesome that you're improving UI Toolkit, but please don't take Unity UI away from me. Next is a simplicity thing that a lot of people have asked about, and that is merging URP and HRB and creating the unified renderer. Again, on the topic of deprecation, they are planning to mark built-in as deprecated on the next-gen version, and will then be removed on a future version. So technically, if you really love the built-in render pipeline, if so, you can still keep using that for at least 4 years. The goal with the unified renderer is so you author things just once, so things like cameras, shaders, cameras, and so on. You do that, and it will work on all platforms and all renders. You just choose from a drop-down menu, do you want the basic renderer, the high-performance renderer, the high-definition renderer, and so on. So instead of having a very complex decision that you have to make in the beginning of the project, instead of that, you can just do things normally, just do it one way, and then using a drop-down menu, you can select how you want your game to run. Now this sounds really good, but I do question how exactly does this work considering how URP and AE have very different feature sets. For example, HRP has a cloud and water system, so will those all of a sudden work in URP? Or AGRP has some features that are not present in URP. So does that mean that if I set the target to URP, does it simply not enable those features? What about handmade shaders? Do those get automatically rewritten or something? Do assets or publishers, do they still have to write multiple shaders with multiple fallbacks? Again, no idea. I'm guessing all of these questions will be answered in the coming months. They mentioned work on a new version of ShaderGraph, ShaderGraph 2. This one has lots of improvements on usability. It has various new nodes, it's got some really awesome portals, and a bunch of tiny improvements. And they're also introducing shader blocks, which from my understanding means that you can make shader graphs and written text shaders and mix them both at the same time. For the next theme, iteration, for this one the goal is really just waging war on all progress bars. Which again, they mention how they are not afraid to re-architecture the entire core in order to make that very ambitious goal, in order to actually succeed with it. One upgrade that I'm sure has been a ton of work is upgrading everything to use the core CLR. This is one big improvement that will make domain reload that much faster. Essentially, it will no longer need to recompile things that never change, things like the Unity core, the long-living code, and so on. When you make some tiny code change, it will only recompile a tiny portion of your code. Now, I believe this speedup has some important caveats with regards to statics not resetting automatically, but if you want to prepare for that, you can already go into the interplay mode settings and set it to reload scene only. Using core CLR also means that Unity will always be at the latest .NET version, so that is much better as opposed to how it's always been, which is how Unity is always way behind both in .NET version and C# version. So this sounds really awesome for quickly making code changes and recompiling, testing them, and so on. Really excellent way to speed up iteration. And the other way they are speeding up iteration is with a brand new content pipeline. This is another area that people are constantly annoyed by. Constantly waiting for ages for some kind of asset to be important. The goal is to import less, import faster, and import without blocking. Right now, importing actually happens quite often. It happens when you create a brand new project, switch to a branch, get the latest thing, save some kind of prefab or do a build. It also happens when saving prefabs. If you save some kind of prefab, it will actually re-import everything under that prefab. So to solve this, they are introducing a brand new data model that is much more performant. Using that, they can now re-import just the tiny thing that changed and not everything else. So for example, the prefab will only spend time re-importing itself and not all of the dependencies. In general, just lots of background tasks being done in the background without actually blocking Unity. So for example, meshes, visual sections, and so on, all of those being loaded, streamed directly, as opposed to waiting for a progress bar that does not let you do anything until it finally loads everything. So always making sure everything happens in the background without blocking your main window. These all sound like really awesome improvements. I mean, the whole thing about the progress bars, that has been a meme in Unity for ages. So these specific improvements do sound like they're actively listening to the community and actively trying to fix the problems that developers have. And the final theme is all about power. This is obviously my favorite one. Starting off with how ECS is going to be baked directly into the core of the engine. So every single game object will be linked with a corresponding entity. Then in the hierarchy, you can also mix both components and mono behaviors. This integration makes it so much easier to use the right tool for the job. When dots make sense, you can use dots. When it doesn't make sense, you can just use game objects. And because they are directly linked, you don't have to necessarily have two completely separate worlds for doing two completely different things. They're linked, so you always work on essentially the exact same object. You just work with it using dots code or mono behavior code. Or simply the fact that every game object is linked with an entity, just because that it will make refactoring so much easier. Right now, if you have a game made with game objects and you want to add dots to it, it does require quite a bit of refactoring. But if every game object is already linked with an entity, if that link already exists by default, then refactoring code in order to add dots after the fact, that should be so much easier, so much better. So this really is an awesome change and makes it so much easier to exploit the full power of dots. Which, by the way, if you want to learn all about dots, check out my course on it. They also mentioned how the API should not change much, so it is perfectly safe to learn dots right now and be ready for whenever this comes to pass. But even if you don't want to directly use dots, you can still benefit from it, like for example for the new animation system. This one has been built from scratch using dots. It looks like it has many really awesome features. For example, you've got skeleton pose editing. Right now in Unity, you cannot edit skeletons. You can create animation events with multiple tracks. You can remap animations between different meshes. It also has an interesting graph system. It looks like it supports IK and a bunch of other settings. Then you even have a hierarchical layered state machine. You can apparently have multiple states active at the same time, all of them affecting different body parts, and all of it being driven by a bunch of parameters. It even has recording and playback capabilities. So you can record some kind of animation, find some kind of animation bug, then just scroll back, go back into a point in time and figure out what exactly caused that bug. So this looks like a very, very capable tool, much more capable in Mechanim, and hopefully super easy to use. With it being based on ECS and dots, it means it is super performant. They showcase a demo with 1,000 nights, all of them fully animated, all of them running independently, all of it running, and it all works really fine on a Unity build. So this really is a great example of what the feature will bring. Even if you don't want to directly work with dots, you can still benefit by using these brand new systems. And the other tool they showcase is the new world building tools. Now, I'm not too familiar with terrain tools, but this looks really impressive. You've got tons of parameters to play with, and the whole thing reacts really nice. Everything looks super realistic, super high quality. You can have some procedural generation that automatically adapts as you move some kind of object. All kinds of rules in order to dynamically generate your worlds. It also integrates easily with shader graphs, so you can make all kinds of custom shaders. And it even has a mode for placing prefabs. So you can place some kind of prefab for some kind of building, and it automatically flattens the terrain behind it. This looks like it saves a ton of time, as opposed to having to manually flatten out the terrain before placing your prefab. And again, with it being based on dots and ECS, it means it is super performant. This giant terrain with tons of detail works perfectly fine on a tiny mobile device. So this is really what I'm most looking for in the future. Getting the engine to a point where all of these Unity tools, all of these are using ECS and dots by default behind it. So even if you yourself don't directly want to handle dots, you will still benefit from these massive upgrades. Now I'm definitely very excited about this Unity Next Gen. More simplicity, faster iteration, and a lot more power. All of that sounds really excellent. The only negative is really just that all of this is still very much far into the future. The earliest this will come out is at least in 2026, with perhaps a small beta build coming out in late 2025. So it will take a while, but this future doesn't look very bright. Those were the two big talks, the keynote and the roadmap. Those are always the highlights of every night. But of course, the event is much more than just these two talks, so here's some more things that I saw and learned. Actually starting with something that happened before the keynote, the Unity Awards. Normally they announce the nominees beforehand and give out the awards at Unite, but this time they announced the nominees over here at Unite, and we'll be having an award show on October 23rd, so that should be fun. The awards cover a lot of topics. There are some awesome games made with Unity, games for desktop, console, mobile, AR, VR, multiplayer, 2D and 3D, and a bunch more. There's also various awards for all kinds of awesomeness and tools, and the community awards where I was actually nominated for best tutorials. So yeah, thank you all so much for voting for me. All nominees and all the categories are all really awesome, so it will be very interesting to see who wins all of these awards. Then something that I just found out during this event was Struct. Apparently the play.unity.com website, that one changed quite a while ago. Now they have something called Struct, which appears to be a built-in browser editor tool for actually building games. This tool has apparently been around for a few years and Unity acquired them recently. They haven't mentioned it too much, so personally I had no idea this existed. The games are built in the browser and they are playable in the browser. There's already one with over 2 million gameplays. So it's crazy how I never heard about this, but apparently it's already extremely popular. This is definitely something that I want to dive deeper into the future. It looks really interesting, so definitely stay tuned for a video on this. Another thing I just found out at the event was the Gem Hunter match. This is a really awesome sample that they released a few months ago, but I just found out about it. I have no idea, but somehow I completely missed it. It's a match 3 game, but this demo is mostly focused on teaching you how to use all kinds of really clever visual effects in 2D. I spoke to one of the devs behind and actually learned quite a few interesting things. Like, did you know there's actually something called camera sorting layer texture? It basically lets you render different layers onto a texture, and then on that texture you can do all kinds of things. Like for example, over here on this demo, they're using that combined with some kind of ripple effect in order to make a ripple effect on the water so it distorts the image behind it. Or how about using tile maps as a level editor? This is also really awesome. You can use tile maps to place down actual logical things, and then the game will run using whatever shape you design with the tile map. If you want to learn about 2D shaders and effects, then definitely go ahead and download this sample. They also made some videos a few months ago talking about how exactly all this works. I also spoke to one of the devs behind Muse. I haven't looked at it for months, but it seems like it has improved quite a lot. The models seem to all have improved pretty significantly. When I last tried it, all the sprites were looking quite janky, but now they actually look really good. You can generate pretty much any kind of sprite, then erase the background. Then you can also even upscale it, and this tool works surprisingly well. I saw a demo of a texture being upscaled from 256 to 2K, and it looked really great. Muse Chat got a bunch of improvements where you can now actually drag some references, so a reference to some kind of object, prefab, and so on, and then use those in the chat to do some kind of thing. You can also see a drop-down menu of the actions that the AI will actually take in your project, and you can save some previously generated actions. So if you find an action that is very helpful, you can simply just save it and then run it again as many times as you want in the future. So like this, it seems like Muse can be used sort of a tool for making tools. You can pre-prepare a bunch of prompts to do a bunch of things, then just save them and reuse them whenever you need to. Muse Animate is also looking really impressive. You can easily generate animations, and perhaps even better, after they are generated, you can move them around. You can move individual body parts and to only use AI to actually put all the other body parts where it makes sense. So this gives you a lot more control, as opposed to really just writing some text and hoping that the final output will be whatever it is that you want. Behavior is another tool, although this one can be used with or without Muse. It's a tool for visually building some behaviors. You can either build the behavior yourself manually, or you can use some text to describe how the AI will create that behavior. So this could be interesting for game designers to prototype various behaviors. The demo they showcased was creating some fish behavior swimming around in a circle. Well, at some time it made me question, okay, so this one is interesting, but what is the difference between using this tool or using normal Unity visual scripting? I'm not too sure. I think maybe this one has some preset behaviors, so I definitely have to look into it. Oh no, the Muse toolset is actually improving quite a lot, which is awesome. Although of course, the one negative is always the price point. The tools are improving a lot, but they are still a little bit hit or miss. So it's hard to justify paying $30 a month unless you know for certain that you are going to use all of this quite a lot. So I gave my feedback that I've given several times. It would be much better to have some kind of free credit system where you have a handful of credits free every single month. That way everyone can try it for free. And if you do find that it does work for your use case, if you get a ton of use out of it, then you can pay to get a ton more credits. I really hope they do change something on the pricing, because like this, all of these tools are improving, so that's awesome, but with such a high barrier to entry, most people likely won't even try it. Technically, there is a free trial, and I was told they're actually resetting all the trials, so if you used it already, you might be able to use it again. Personally, I might use my new free trial in order to do a video on this. I'm very curious to see how all the tools have improved since I last looked at them. Then I also attended a bunch of talks. I believe all of them were recorded, so they should be coming out the next few days or weeks. I saw a talk on dots. It is titled Connecting Dots, Let's Make a Game with Entities. This one was mostly a beginner talk. It's really just helping people get started with dots. Now for me, since I've been researching and building my entire dots course, because of that I didn't necessarily learn much new, but it was a nice refresher of the basics. The talk probably helped a bunch of people finally get started with dots, since they actually presented in a pretty simple manner. Normally dots sounds really intimidating, but the way they presented it with a nice demo, it actually seemed pretty easy to get started with. The game they demoed is something like Plants vs Zombies. There is a GitHub you can download if you want to try it out for yourself. Another talk I saw was how they managed to make Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, make that one super performant, hitting 60 FPS on all platforms. It was quite fascinating to hear all the tricks they had to do in order to squeeze on that performance, especially from the Switch. They did a lot of merging with meshes. They talked about using tools to auto-move backfaces in order to get fewer geometry. They showcased lots of tools for auto-playing the game and keeping track of performance across every single level and every part of each level. So they had a really huge table with all kinds of numbers, showing what kind of parts need to be improved a little bit more. Honestly, this talk was really awesome for seeing how big studios at this level create tools for helping them build their games. What they achieved with this game was definitely super impressive. Another technical talk that I attended was one on City Skylines 2. Apparently, they started development back in 2017 and they used dots right from the start. That means they literally use it right from version 0.01. Again, they showed lots of tools they built to help them actually build the game. And in this one, the biggest challenge was actually due to the fact that they adopted ECS so soon. Back then, for example, Entities rendering did not exist, so they had to build their own renderer and tons of ECS specific tools. Thankfully nowadays, if you do pick up dots, you don't need to do all of this yourself. These tools are already built in now with Unity 6. So on this one, actually one interesting question at the end, an interesting question from the audience, was someone asked how if dots was to blame for the terrible performance at launch, to which the developer responded that no, dots and ECS were not the issue. The cause was more GPU based, which I'm guessing probably due to having to build their own renderer from scratch. And the developer also mentioned that nowadays, apparently it's much better. So yep, that's my recap of Unite 2024. It was a really awesome event, I loved it, possibly my favorite Unite. Lots of information and talking to a lot of cool people. Thanks to everyone who came up to me to say hi. Talking to people makes me really inspired to keep making awesome tutorials to help you on your learning journey. So definitely stay tuned for lots of awesome videos in the future covering many of the tools we saw here. And of course, stay tuned for the future of Unity. Looking at this next gen version, this one is looking really awesome and I can't wait until it arrives. Alright, I hope you found this recap useful. Thanks for watching and I'll see you next time.